All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is a great honor to be here at the center where such extraordinary work has happened over many years. It is a joyous time in this city when we get to this point in June. Tremendous anticipation of one of the great events that we have in the city each year, the Pride Parade. And as we have said before, and Commissioner Bratt and I will say repeatedly in this gathering, we expect the biggest and the best Pride Parade we've ever had to happen this year. I want to emphasize we expect tremendously positive, a positive day on Sunday, huge attendance, a lot of pride, a lot of energy, and a very, very safe day for everyone. I want to acknowledge and thank some of the folks who are with us, in addition to those who will speak. I want to thank our Deputy Commissioner for Intelligence and Counterterrorism, John Miller, our Chief of Counterterrorism, Chief Waters, Chief of Patrol, Chief Gomez, Chief of Transit, Joe Fox. I want to thank our Executive Director for Citywide Event Coordination and Management, Michael Paul Carey, who has played a leading role in putting the parade together. You're going to hear from one of the co-chairs of NYC Pride. I want to thank the other one, Marianne Roberto Fine. Thank you for your great work. And our elected officials, Senator Hoylman, Assemblymember Glick, thank you so much for your support and your partnership in everything we're doing. I have a lot of pride in this city and all the communities that make up this city. And I can safely say, and I'll challenge any mayor in the world on this point, we have the most vibrant LGBT community anywhere in the world, right here in New York City. And we are the birthplace of the LGBT civil rights movement. Happened not far from here at Stonewall in 1969. So when we celebrate Pride, we do it with particular passion. And this year, we have an obligation to our nation in the wake of Orlando to show what pride and inclusion looks like. And the whole city will be celebrating and standing up for and with our LGBT community. The NYPD, I just want to credit at the beginning the extraordinary efforts of the NYPD, and thank you to the officers who are here with us and the officers outside, everything they're doing to keep everyone safe. I was very struck and appreciative of the car you saw outside, painted in pride colors, a real act of solidarity and a show of the NYPD's deep connection to this community and to communities all over the city. Now, from time to time this year, we have talked about the question of New York values. So I will restate, New York values include inclusion, a respect for diversity, a respect for everyone's right to speak up and express themselves. And that's what will be epitomized on Sunday, a city that includes and embraces everyone, and that's why the city works so well. We know that we protect that freedom, we protect that liberty with the world's finest police force. And I want everyone to know, whether it's New Yorkers or folks coming from anywhere in the world to be a part of this powerful moment, you will be safe, you will be protected. You'll see a lot of the same protections that have been in place at every Pride Parade, but you'll see more as well. You'll see additional measures to keep us safe. Some will be visible, and then there'll be other important measures you won't see. This is because of the extraordinary sophistication and capacity of the NYPD. And it's particularly true because we now have the strongest and most sophisticated counter-terror unit anywhere in the country, the Critical Response Command. So you'll see very well-prepared officers out along the parade route, helping everyone to know that they are safe. I want to emphasize there are no specific threats directed against this parade. Very important point. There are no specific threats directed against this parade. But that does not stop us from being vigilant and from using all of our resources. I'm sometimes asked by reporters from elsewhere whether we choose to be particularly vigilant on any given day. And my statement always is we have been vigilant every day since 9/11. What has changed is we've increased our anti-terror capacity consistently since then, and especially in the last year. And a reminder, the NYPD has consistently prevented acts of terror, 20 plots either directed at NYC or initiated here that were foiled by the NYPD. And that is an extraordinary track record that we are now building upon. We also know that we are one of the truly global cities. And anytime there's an attack on any one of the communities that make up New York City, we respond. Whether it's the LGBT community being attacked in Orlando, or Jewish communities, Muslim communities, any community in the world that comes under attack, we recognize the ramifications for New York City, and we respond. We are, in that vein, obviously aware of the events as we speak in Germany. We are waiting for more information to come in. Commissioner Bratton and Deputy Commissioner Miller and I were speaking about that before this press conference began. We'll have more to say on that soon as we have fuller developments, but we're already taking steps to immediately respond to some of what we do know. So it is important for everyone to know that attending this parade on Sunday is an act of pride by and for and with the LGBT community. It's also an act of pride in this city and showing that this is a city that every time will stand up for all New Yorkers, will stand up for all our communities. I want to urge all New Yorkers, come out, show your pride, show your sense that this is a city for everyone. A few words in Spanish. Este domingo esperamos celebrar el desfile del orgullo gay más grande y más seguro de la historia. En nuestra ciudad defendemos y protegemos a todas las comunidades. Así que vengan y participen con los miles de neoyorquinos que se unirán para mostrar su orgullo. With that, I want to commend and thank Commissioner Bratton and his whole leadership team. The preparations for this parade have been outstanding, and the extraordinary work being done to deepen the connection of the NYPD to the LGBT community and all communities has been exemplary. It's my honor to introduce Commissioner Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is my first visit to this center, so I want to thank our host for the opportunity to visit and have this event here at this very significant location. We'll talk in a moment about the parade, but I want to introduce Chief Gomez, Chief of Patrol, who will discuss some of what we're doing around the parade security, and John Miller, very well known to you as Chief of Commissioner of Counterterrorism Intelligence. John has had his head buried in his smartphone for the last few minutes, so we apologize for that, but there's a terrorism event unfolding as we're sitting here in Germany, mass shooting in a movie theater, and we're watching that event very closely as it unfolds. So many of the officers that you saw in front of the building, our Critical Response Command, will be leaving to go off and go to many of the theaters in this city so that, as we always do with the large amount of resources that the mayor has provided to us, in response to a terrorism incident anywhere in the world, we will immediately err on the side of caution by ramping up our police presence at similar locations. So at this moment, we are, in fact, doing that around the city at major movie locations. As to the events on Sunday, a very celebratory day. I'm personally looking forward to it. My wife and I will be marching, as we have done in the past, proudly with behind our police band and proudly with hundreds of members of our Gay Officers Action League that includes many New York City police officers, including some who were here at this press conference with us this morning. We are very proud of them and certainly very proud of our department's efforts to continue to improve our relationship with that community. We will, out of caution, be increasing the size of the police detail this year with some degree of focus that we might not have had in years past on the issue of terrorism, certainly in light of the events in Orlando. We also, in anticipation of a larger number of attendees, will be increasing the size of both our uniformed and plainclothes presence to deal with crowd management, crowd control issues for what we anticipate will be a larger attendance at this event. So you can expect to see more police, and you can expect to feel very comfortable attending this parade. It's a great parade. My wife and I love marching in it. It's very lively, very active. She enjoys dancing, and she ends up dancing half the route as we move along. Good exercise. And so we encourage, come on down. Gay or straight, come on down. It's one of New York's great attractions and great events, and it will be safe. We in the NYPD and our colleagues and the various law enforcement agencies we work with will work to ensure that. And again, I think the weather forecast is actually pretty good for it also, so even better. Bring your suntan lotion also when you come. That's probably going to be the most important safeguard that you can have on that day.
Amen.
Okay. If I could, Mr. Mayor, introduce Carlos to talk somewhat about what the uniform side of the parade is going to do, and then John Miller can speak to some of what he will be up to. Carlos?
Well, good morning. As the Commissioner has said, this Sunday's parade, as well as other festivities and celebrations, we'll see a significant increase in police personnel in the various aspects of the various layers that we will be implementing. Speaking of the parade itself, it kicks off at noon sharp at 5th Avenue and 36th Street. It goes southbound to 8th Street and then proceeds westbound through Christopher and Greenwich. There will be over 20,000 participants, including 85 floats, numerous bands, vehicles, and a contingent of 200 motorcycles. Last year, we estimated the crowd to be 1.6 million. That's amazing. 1.6 million spectators, and this year we anticipate an increase in that spectatorship. There will be thousands of uniform officers assigned along the route and the surrounding areas. Those are officers that you will see. There will also be police officers that you will not be able to see. Those are officers that will be attired in civilian clothes. They'll be mixing in with the crowds to detect any possible suspicious behavior or activity. We have greatly increased our counterterrorism efforts to act as a visible deterrence as well as a quick response capability. We have added more CERT teams. Those are heavy weapons teams. They are comprised of highly trained individuals from our SRG, Strategic Response Group, from our CRC, the Critical Response Command, and from our Emergency Services Unit. Those units and the creation of the CRC and the SRG a year and a half ago have certainly greatly increased our counterterrorism efforts here in New York City. We will also have counterterrorism personnel equipped with radiation detection devices assigned to the route and surrounding areas. We will deploy explosive detection canines and utilize a network of cameras to monitor the events in the adjoining areas. We will also be patrolling from above. We will have our aviation helicopters monitor rooftops, monitor crowd sizes, monitor traffic. And this year we are also assigning officers on rooftop observation posts, again, to look down at the crowds and try to detect any suspicious activity. Harbor vessels will be assigned to patrol the waterways on the west side. We have several events at the piers that afternoon and that evening. We anticipate traffic to be adversely affected on Sunday, so we strongly encourage the use of public transportation. And because of that, we've increased the presence of transit officers, both at transit stations as well as riding trains leading to the West Village. We are not neglecting the other four boroughs. There are several other events on Sunday, actually throughout the weekend, sporting events and concerts. We are policing those accordingly, and in some cases we have also increased our deployment at those locations. We always seek the assistance of the public. As I said, there would be at least 1.5 million sets of eyes, pairs of eyes and ears viewing this event on Sunday. Certainly, if you see something, if you hear something, I encourage you obviously to report it. You could tell an officer, and you won't have to look far to find an officer. There will be so many along the route and surrounding area. And certainly you could always call our hotline, counterterrorism hotline, which is 888 NYC SAFE. Lastly, I'd like to thank the organizer. They work very closely with our borough commander, Chief Bill Morris here in Manhattan South, to prepare for this event. And I look forward to a safe and festive Sunday and really the entire weekend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. And my commendation to Chief Morris, who is always cool in the saddle, deals with a lot in this city, but does it very, very well. Thank you, Chief. It's now my pleasure to introduce the co-chair for NYC Pride and has been a leader in organizing a variety of events this week that means so much to the community. Co-chair David Studinsky. David.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I must, without a doubt, give a great thanks to the rest of our NYC Pride team, thousands of volunteers that you'll encounter this week, a tremendous staff, a nimble staff, but a tremendous staff that we work with, and a great executive board and general membership who comprise this nonprofit organization that was founded in 1984 to take over the march, and now has grown to a roster of 11 events this week for Pride Week. It began on June 19th and will conclude this Sunday, as you've heard. I would be remiss, of course, to say that our hearts are certainly still heavy from the incidents in Orlando last weekend. It's something that shook our community and is still something that we're going to keep those folks with us everywhere we go this weekend and everywhere we go in the future. And later this afternoon, you'll be hearing a little bit more from us and our media team as to our plans to recognize and memorialize those victims in Orlando. They're not alone, of course. There are so many other folks we've lost in the community this year and in years past, particularly the bisexual and the transgender, gender nonconforming communities who are still great victims of hate crimes here and abroad, and also suicides as well. And it's important that we remember those folks as we go forward this weekend in celebration, but also in awareness and respect of those who have lost and cannot march with us this weekend. I've been talking to a lot to our community leaders, our organizing groups that will be with us with the march this week, but also our volunteers who will be out there on the streets, and talking to them a lot about this week and answering their questions. And the first thing I've been telling all of them is, look, if you're anxious, you're nervous, maybe you're a little uncertain, that's okay, that's normal. That's a perfectly acceptable response to something so horrible to happen to all of us. But the important thing is that we remember those 49 people we lost last weekend and so many other lives that we've lost. And we don't hide. The worst thing that we can do as a community is to hide. Many of us started in closets, and the last thing that any of us should do is go back into them. And that's what this weekend is really about, is going out and showing our pride and taking that pride that we'll all have on Sunday and waking up Monday, waking up Tuesday, waking up Wednesday, and waking up for the rest of the year and having that pride with us wherever we go. And it's certainly a pride that I'm proud to wear literally on my shoulder throughout the year here in this wonderful city that I now call home, formerly as an Indiana native. So yes, the march will go on, Pride Fest will go on, the Dance on the Pier, Tease, our rally on Saturday or on Friday night that we're looking forward to open up and kick off the Pride weekend. These events are still on. Pride is going to happen, and we're going to have an amazing and successful weekend. The one thing I do want to call out, this is not an unusual circumstance in terms of our communication with the NYPD and the mayor's office, the governor's office, and so many other state and local agencies. We could not do this without the support of all of these individuals, and I thank them from the bottom of our heart to allow us the ability to put on these amazing events for our community and to do this and to make this city and enrich it so much better. Without them, we would not be able to do this. And they are tremendous partners, not just this year, but for many, many years. And of course, if you're aware of where this movement started, you'll appreciate that irony. And with that, I thank you very much for having us, and we're looking forward to an amazing and successful Pride 2016.
Thank you very, very much, David. We're going to take questions on the Pride weekend and anything related to policing, and then we'll open up for other types of questions as well. Yes?
Commissioner Bratton, how do you think the relationship is between the NYPD and the LGBT community, and what programs are in place to improve upon it?
It's a relationship that's constantly improving. Numbers of gay officers in the department who are out are increasing. There are many efforts that we are engaged in with political leadership, leaders in the community, to address some of the issues of concern they have relative to department policies, practices, and procedures that might impact on the multifaceted community. That I think that where we are versus where we were is a lot of progress. My involvement with this community goes back to 1975, 76, when I believe I was assigned as the first liaison from an American police department to the gay community in the city of Boston. So I've had a lot of exposure to the issues of concern of this community through the years, and that helps inform me and during my current time here as Commissioner in New York. And as evidenced by all the collaboration that's involved in this event, I think that's reflective of just how far we have come over that period of time.
Just a quick follow. I think it's very much related to everything the administration is trying to do to deepen the relationship, not just between police and community, but between all of city government and all of our communities. So, for example, we put a real focus on the needs of transgender New Yorkers. And you know there's been some really horrible legislation around the country trying to exclude and discriminate against transgender people. In this city, we've done the exact opposite. We've made very clear how people's rights must be recognized and protected. In fact, we've gone and advertised on the subways to make the point that this is a city that respects all people. Same point could be made, for example, about homeless and runaway youth, so many of whom are members of the LGBT community and many of whom are transgender. We've put much more investment in providing space to protect homeless and runaway youth, to give them a safe space and a place where they'll be respected, to give them beds they can sleep in. So many of these young people, I've said this many times as a parent, it fundamentally disgusts me that any parent would put their child out on the street. And that's what's happening around this city, sadly, for too many LGBT youth and particularly transgender youth. The city of New York sends the opposite message. We embrace you, we respect you, we want you to be safe, we have a place for you. So I think it's all connected to a different approach to deepening respect for the community. Yes?
Will there be a policy about enforcement with a significant police presence or increased police presence on low-level offenses, open container, disorderly conduct, public urination, marijuana at the parade? And is that something to be concerned about?
Seeking cooperation from the public on this issue. It is a huge event, and in terms of the issues you raise are ones of concern, but this is one where, to as great a degree as possible, we would seek public cooperation with us. Some of the actions that you talk about, public urination, et cetera, are offensive to anybody, and so issues that we need to be mindful of. We are, over these last several years, as you're well aware in the department, attempting to, wherever possible, modify our enforcement action to use the lowest level necessary to deal with an issue. Verbal admonishment, warning, civil enforcement, summons, arrest where appropriate. So in terms of policing of this event, it'll be very similar to policing of any other event in the city, whether it's the Puerto Rican Day Parade, the Irish Parade, St. Patrick's Parade, that the idea of we will attempt to work with the public to the best of our ability, that everybody has a safe and enjoyable day.
Ozzy?
The DOI office issued a report yesterday that said, among other things, that there was a concentration of quality of life enforcement in areas where the residents are predominantly people of color. And they said that there was more summonses issued than expected in those kind of police precincts. I'm wondering, what's your understanding of the racial disparity of enforcement actions in those communities?
Let me just jump in and begin, because I think there's been some misunderstanding about that report from the beginning, so I just want to start and pass to the Commissioner. The report looked at a particular issue regarding quality of life enforcement and how it related to other types of crimes. Was there a correlation? It looked at a particular period of time, and it looked at only some factors. Still, obviously, I respect the Commissioner of Investigation and the police IG, but I want to be clear. They made clear this was not a broader analysis of the entire strategy of broken windows, for example, and it wasn't an attempt to look at all issues of how we police all communities. It was a fairly narrow time frame and looking at a very narrow question. Our view is that what we're doing in terms of making the city increasingly safe, but also bringing police and community increasingly together, is an updated version of the broken window strategy. The same strategy that helped make us the safest big city in America is still making us the safest big city in America. It's constantly in evolution. And we obviously want it to be fairly applied in all neighborhoods. So this is a work in progress, and it connects also to neighborhood policing, which is an area I just want to make one sort of programming note. I do think we're going to be talking a lot more about neighborhood policing and the impact it's going to have on improving the relationship between police and community. I hope all of you will look at it and go out and visit precincts and see, because this is one of the best kept secrets in New York City, the on-the-ground approach to policing is changing, and I think you're going to see a lot of positive ramifications from that. Please.
You have identified what is the fatal flaw in that analysis and what makes it basically useless. In its narrow focus on a 5-year period of time and focusing on only 2 issues, it doesn't take into account that in dealing with quality of life issues, in dealing with crime, you need to look at the multidimensional aspects of the problem, as this mayor and as this commissioner have done. He still has 2.5 years, and as I've done over 45 years. So that report is basically of no value to the NYPD in terms of, because of its flawed methodology. Quality of life enforcement, or broken windows as it's sometimes referred to, is an essential component of policing. Its essentiality, however, is dependent on how it is implemented. And the mayor and I have made a great deal of effort over these 2.5 years to modify it to reflect the changed city. This city is very different than the city I first experienced in 1990. Some of you were around in 1990. Most New Yorkers who live here now were not, so they have no remembrance of how bad things were when there was no attention paid to quality of life enforcement. Like dealing with a serious illness, it took a lot of enforcement to change behavior. The city of New York, 2016, is a changed city in many ways, and it's changed because the police, over time, have adapted its enforcement strategies, more so in the last 2.5 years, I'd argue, than in the previous 20 years. We are making, as evidenced by the bills that were signed by the City Council last week, efforts to ensure that the medicine, like a doctor dealing with the cancer patient's a lot better. I don't need to use as much radiation or chemo. Maybe now I can just basically use other less threatening medicines. That's effectively what we're doing. So that report was not needed. It is deeply flawed and will impact not at all on the practices of the NYPD because of its fatal flaw. It was too narrowly focused, and by focusing on too narrow a time frame, it did not take into context 25 years of my experience dealing with that issue. I think I have a lot more expertise than the IG, and in this case, the Department of Investigation, which I fail to see what role they have in this incident at all. The IG exists as an independent entity to monitor the police department. The DOI does not have a role in this matter. So for the DOI to basically issue the report, I just don't understand that aspect. In any event, we respect the IG, we respect their role, but in this instance, this was a flawed report that was not necessary. Mayor and I are committed to changing the practices of this department so that we effectively do no harm to the best of our ability as we enforce the law in the city.
Go ahead.
Mayor, I just wanted to ask if you agree with the assessment the commissioner just gave about the IG and the DOI report, and what you see as the role of the IG at this point in evaluating broken windows policing.
Look, I agree with the commissioner's assessment of the substance of the report 100%. As a matter of statute, obviously, there's a role for DOI, there's a role for the police IG. That's all still being worked through in practice because these are a brand new reality of having a police IG. So I think we have a work in progress here. But the bottom line is, as with any report, we'll look at it respectfully. We'll see if there's something to learn. I think in this case, I commend the commissioner's point that we are confident that the path we're on gets to the core theoretical issue that was being raised. Are we doing something that's effective? Yes. Is it being done increasingly in a fair and balanced manner towards all communities? Yes. Are we in a constant effort to reform and improve? Yes. So I'm very comfortable where we are. Yeah.
Respectfully, it doesn't sound like you and the commissioner are on the same page, if you think that
We're on
the
exactly
report
the same page. Exactly the same page.
will look to see if there's something to learn. And when you spoke, you said that.
I said I have all reports. That was literally about 2 minutes ago. I said any report, Grace, let's try and respect the fact that if a government entity puts out a report, we're going to look at it. But I agree with the commissioner. The core findings we don't see merit in. And by the way, to be fair, it is in writing, and I've heard this directly from the DOI commissioner and from the police IG. They were not attempting an overall assessment of broken windows. They were looking at a more narrow set of issues. But my view is those issues are being addressed.
Gun licenses to the wealthy and the famous and elected officials. Is this essentially saying that if you're wealthy and famous and you should
I hear
also
the question.
have gun, or rather,
I got it. I got it.
Is this what equality is?
No, I want to speak to the overall situation. First of all, the Democrats in the House are doing something very, very important. I just want to take the first part of your question. And the commissioner has spoken about this for years and years, that the NRA's lock on the legislative process in Washington is unacceptable for this nation. This is one of the moments where that NRA power is starting to break down. And what the House Democrats are doing in a very vivid fashion is saying no more. We're not, excuse me, I'm going to answer your question. If you want a respectful answer, let me finish what I'm saying. So my point in that is I believe we're seeing the beginning of fundamental change on the national front. Obviously, all government policies should be about fairness, and no one should be treated differently because of their wealth level. The commissioner has already said, and I'll turn to him, that we're looking at the work that was done by that unit, and obviously some mistakes are made. So we want to make whatever reforms are necessary to make sure it is being done fairly, equitably, and no one who shouldn't have a gun should ever get a permit. Commissioner.
In America today, that it is estimated there are more guns than people. There are 350 million of us, and it's estimated that there are more than 350 million firearms in the possession of Americans. In this city of 8.5 million people, New York has consistently over the years sought to the best of our ability with our various laws and regulations, controlled the licensing of firearms in the city for a variety of purposes. A license to carry a concealed weapon, a license to have a weapon at your home, a license to have a weapon possibly on your premise. We have approximately 150,000 licenses of all types for a city of 8.5 million people. So we've worked very hard over the years to keep the number of firearms to a very low level, legal authorized firearms. The current investigation that the Internal Affairs Division is engaged in has indicated quite clearly that some members of this department were behaving inappropriately in a criminal way and working in conjunction with the U.S. Attorney. We have a continuing investigation. There have been a number of arrests and maybe more. In the meantime, we are thoroughly reviewing all of the licenses that we have issued, our licensing practices, to improve on that. We will continue to the best of our ability with the laws in this city and the laws in the state and the unfortunate very limited laws in the United States to try to keep the number of firearms in this city, pistols, long guns, to a very small number. That is the policy. Unfortunately, there are some in the department who chose to engage in criminal acts that violated the trust that you should have in how licenses are applied for and how they are granted. And Larry Burns, my Deputy Commissioner for Legal Matters, Deputy Commissioner Resnick are working very closely within the department to reorganize our systems of accountability and we'll be working very closely with the U.S. Attorney to ensure prosecution of any member of this department who violated the law relative to how those licenses are issued.
Thank you. Marcia. Marcia. Go ahead, Marcia.
Commissioner, I wonder if you could share with us your thinking about why you decided to allow Deputy Chief John Sprague and Inspector Peter de Blasio to come off of modified and to retire with so-called good guy letters, and what your thinking is about the remaining people in the department who've either been modified or transferred in terms of their desire to retire, and if they will be able to retire without facing department charges.
I'll ask Larry Byrne to join us at the table to give a more detailed answer on that. But also on this, that under current laws, et cetera, they are entitled to file for retirement and retire. If, in fact, as the investigation between Internal Affairs and U.S. Attorney as it goes forward, that those officers who are retiring are found to have engaged in some type of action that would require criminal action by the U.S. Attorney, and if upon conviction, those guns, et cetera, licenses would in fact be revoked and returned. But we are in the early stages of a very extensive federal investigation. Some individuals have already been arrested, as you're aware. Others are the subject of investigation. But until charges are filed by the U.S. Attorney, effectively that they remain just that. They remain not under criminal indictment and are entitled to effectively file for retirement. In terms of, I'll be quite frank with you, that these investigations go on for years, as you know. They're not wrapped up within days or weeks. So I would just assume members of this department who are in fact now in positions where they cannot perform the full duties of a police officer, if they opt to retire, retire now, rather than keeping them on the payroll where I can only use them in modified assignments for, in some instances, years. So I'm very comfortable with the actions that we have taken, that we will be taking, and that are being done with the full awareness of the U.S. Attorney. As you know, in these matters of criminal investigations, we always defer to the investigating entity, in this case the U.S. Attorney. That criminal investigation is comprehensive. I'm very intimate with it. I get briefed on it every day. It is not something that is going to be done in the near term. So the actions that I'm allowing to be taken are in reflection of my awareness of the investigation, the timeliness of it. Larry Byrne can be a little more specific about some of what officers are entitled to do under state retirement laws.
Did I understand you correctly that if you find out, like in the case of Deputy Chief Sprague and Inspector de Blasio, that if charges are brought against them, you could revoke their guns, you could take their guns away?
Let Larry speak to that in the sense of right now there are no criminal charges against them. There are no department charges against them. And I'll let Larry speak to these issues. He, like myself, is briefed on this every day in our current investigation with the U.S. Attorney. Larry?
The short answer, Marcia, is we can revoke their pistol licenses and good guy letter at any point in time. So hypothetically, and we do this all the time with officers who have retired, about half of the outstanding gun permits in New York City fall into two categories: retired law enforcement, not just police, but marshals, FBI agents, and rifles and shotguns, people who are using them principally for target shooting or hunting. Anytime a law enforcement officer is charged with a crime, we revoke their pistol permit if they have it. That's our standard practice. It's always been our standard practice with respect to our retired members. So we have the ability to do that, and we monitor the situation very carefully. The police commissioner has many powers, but he does not have the ability to prevent someone from retiring. You want to put in your papers to retire, you can retire. We can't stop that. One in the newspaper said that these guys were allowed to retire with full benefits. There's no ability to deny them their pension or medical coverage absent a criminal conviction. And they not only have not been convicted of any crime, they haven't been charged with any crime.
Are you basically saying that it's important to get them off the payroll because they're no use to you anyway? They can't really serve in any...
That's exactly the commissioner's point. Right. We can't have them in an operational position. Why should we pay them a full chief's salary to sit in an office and do nothing? It's better for the public for them to retire, take their reduced pension. They can go on.
There's something else on this, by taking this early retirement, if you will, which is their choice, I am not allowing them to run their time, the expression run their time. Most of these chiefs have built up what is called accrue time, working holidays, et cetera, over now 20, 30 years. Most of them are now leaving behind anywhere from 1 year to 2 years of accrued time, which if they were to stay in the department and start running that time, means they would not come to work for a year or 2 years and receive full pay and benefits. That is the practice in the department. They are not being allowed to retire with that accrued time. So at their salary levels, those that are retiring, that I'm basically encouraging to go, right off the bat, they're paying anywhere from a $200,000 to $300,000 penalty as they go out the door because they cannot take that time with them.
Okay, let's get some other people in the mix. Andrew.
They are on the Building Back program. You seem
Wait, let's stay on policing. We'll get to you. Absolutely, you'll get number one on the news set, but on policing-related issues, Jillian.
Commissioner, I was just wondering if you could comment on the acquittal of another officer in the Freddie Gray case in Baltimore, where you had feelings about the prosecutor overcharging. Just wondering what you think of the acquittal.
Well, in light of the fact, if I understand it, the officer who was most severely charged by the prosecutor was just found not guilty by the judge in Baltimore. That's the information I have within the last 5 or 10 minutes. We'll let the district attorney down there speak to the charging. See, it's, as I've been watching that trial, that the questioning by the judge of the prosecutors was very probative, very probing in the sense of how did you arrive at these charges? And they weren't able to justify it, and now there's been a not guilty finding. So I stand by my comment.
Commissioner, we talked about yesterday the three that were arrested driving through trying to drive through the Holland Tunnel with the arsenal of weapons. They were heading to a place in Brooklyn. We headed out to that address yesterday. We understand that police did speak to an individual. Was she a minor, and was there an overdose death this week in that community? And are drugs?
A lot of questions together. Why don't we start at the beginning with the...
You would have no detail on that, Your Honor, but Bob Boyce would, in fact, be able to respond to that.
Is Bob here? Come on over, Bob.
As always.
There he is.
Come on down.
That female that was talked about, we did find her not in Brooklyn, in Bayside, and she was a runaway from New Jersey. We are assisting the Port Authority Police Department in regards to that, and that's where it stands right now. That was in Bedford-Stuyvesant, the 8-1 precinct. There was a 20-year-old female overdose, yes. I'm sorry? It was. Again, this is a Port Authority case. It was their case. We assisted them. So I would refer the question there, but there was an overdose that we took. And right now, we don't know. There's an autopsy being done right now.
The girl in Queens, was she a minor? Was she at all?
She was a minor. She was missing from New Jersey, reported missing. She was returned to her mother in New Jersey.
Behind, yeah.
Commissioner, about police officer Joe Edward, who was found guilty of stomping on a suspect's head in 2014. The condition is that he has to resign or either be terminated by yourself. Are you going to terminate this officer? And
If he has been found guilty, he will be terminated from the department. That's correct.
Do you think the sentence was appropriate?
In terms of, quite obviously, the court did, so I will support the court's finding on that.
Back.
Commissioner, returning to the Inspector General's report, it seems like the core finding is that they found no evidence that arresting and summoning people on quality of life basis leads to a reduction in crime. You disagree?
I disagree very strongly with that. And every day, you and the media report when my officers make a fare evasion arrest and find a gun on that individual, make a fare evasion arrest, find they wanted on warrants for murder. So I disagree strongly with that element of their report. I've been doing this for a long time. I think I have a lot more expertise than they have on this issue. It is a foundation of policing that those small issues oftentimes lead to more significant issues. Is it the single most significant cause for the reduction of crime in this city? No, it is not, and I have stated that from the beginning. It is an essential element, but I have never said that that is the primary reason for crime down in this city. It is a significant contributing factor, but not the sole reason.
Go ahead. Can you get what you need? Okay.
The complaint that was brought with the arrest of the two chiefs the other day included statements that indicated that Reichert and Recknitz had some role in the promotion of one of them to a better assignment, and that this was something that they thought could be done because of the clout that the ultra-Orthodox community has in the city. What do you do to make it clear that there is not going to be that special kind of treatment, to try and dissuade police officers from doing things that they wouldn't be doing that are outside the ordinary in terms of benefiting a particular group?
Let me just start on that. I think it's happening as you see before your very eyes. Remember that the events in question began in 2012 and 2013. That's what was made clear this week by the U.S. Attorney. Before Commissioner Bratton held his office, before I held my office, this problem was already happening. But it was the police, it was the Internal Affairs Bureau, and then ultimately the U.S. Attorney that acted to stop it. Now, the consequences, as we just discussed in the previous questions, the consequences for the officers, the senior officers who broke the law, who broke their trust of, their oath of trust, they're going to experience very real and public consequences. And the individuals who undertook the bribery or whatever other charges they'll get, they're going to receive very real consequences. So in that vein, the system is working, and it's sending a very powerful message up and down the line that no one deserves special favoritism, that any acts of illegality or violations of ethics will be very severely treated. So I want to emphasize, nothing speaks more powerfully than actions, and we're seeing actions right now. Go ahead.
As it relates to that issue, as you might expect, that part of the investigation, inferring that an individual received a transfer or a promotion because of undue influence, if you will, that is very disturbing to me. It is a significant part of the investigation, one of great interest to me, in that if that occurred, who was involved with it, because it's something that we do not condone, tolerate, or practice in the NYPD. That the promotions in the department, the transfers are controlled by me and my executive staff, who I rely on to make recommendations. And I rely on them that their recommendations are based on their understanding of the performance and capabilities of the people they're recommending, not somebody that is basically calling in a favor. These men and women work too hard to get these promotions, to have that promotion demeaned by the fact they got it not because of their experience and commitment to the city, but because of a favor. So that element of the investigation, I'll be very interested as it continues. And we seek to identify if in fact that occurred and who may have been involved, either former officers or current members of the department. So again, it's ongoing and one of great concern to me, because that has certainly not been my practice as chief. In my relationship with this mayor, one of the great satisfactions working as commissioner in this city at this time is I have been free of that undue influence, if you will, political or otherwise, in making my promotion selections.
Yes.
Commissioner, does the NYPD owe LGBT people an apology for Stonewall in 1969, given that it was the NYPD that raided it and beat people?
Well, there's no doubt now denying that out of that terrible experience came so much good, that it was the tipping point, if you will. So I think we should all celebrate that out of that terrible experience, that a lot of good came going forward. An apology, that I don't think so. I don't think that's necessary. The apology is all that has occurred since then, in the sense that we have sought some of my predecessors. Certainly I can speak to my time in policing, going back to 1975 when I was appointed to deal with the community, that we've come a long way, as evidenced by the officers who are sitting in the front row here, that times have changed and are continuing to change because of the events that back then.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor or the Commissioner.
Let's take care of these two radio stations here.
There you go.
Are you, either one or both of you, concerned about a perception that there are high-ranking officers under arrest or under investigation that are allowed to collect a pension?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what's the question?
Are allowed to collect a pension, and that they can, put in for the retirement and collect pension when they are accused of breaking the law?
If I I may speak, that is the current law in this state. It's under great discussion currently up in, has been, I guess, in the legislature for a number of years. My own perspective on pension is that a pension is earned certainly by the person that is working for the city, but the pension is also earned by the family. The family from, while that person is at work, is away from that family. So it's a pension that's earned by and for the family. So we have to think long and hard about taking a pension away, because effectively you may be depriving the individual of the benefit of it, but you're also depriving the wife, the children, family members who may be significantly ill, needing medical attention and care. It's a much more complex issue than it would seem on its surface. And I look at it in its total complexity rather than just narrowly that we're punishing the person that abused their position.
I'm wondering if we could get an update on the city's reaction to what's happening in Germany. We don't really know.
John Miller can probably give you an update on that as it's been evolving. John?
As the police commissioner often says, the first story is never the last story. So we've been monitoring that minute by minute as it started off as a report of a gunman with 25 to 50 injured. What we are getting now, and we're still verifying this through our foreign posts overseas as well as through open source, is there is no apparent nexus to terrorism, A. B, the gunman appears to be someone who may have been emotionally disturbed. We're looking for more depth on that. C, it appears that the gun may not have been a real gun, and that the injuries may have been from people trying to get out of the theater as opposed to being wounded by any kind of gunfire during the confrontation between the gunman and police. So I think that's going to significantly ramp down our posture here. We'll continue to look at it as it develops, but it appears to be less serious now as that information comes in than it started. I will say, the way our synapses fire here, they fire very quickly on the idea that we tend to react in terms of shifting protection around and sorting through it as we go than the opposite, which would be to wait a number of hours and then assess protection, simply because in the event that a terrorist group like ISIL or Al-Qaeda that has a global posture decided to do simultaneous attacks in multiple cities, we want to be able to move very quickly towards those things. So today I would consider, while we watch this story evolve and change, one of our normal drills.
Please. Yeah, no worries.
About the train in the Bronx, a young kid was severely attacked. If we can get an update on that. And is there any update on the incident earlier this month in Brooklyn where a Latino family got into a fight with the city store owner, and I think a number of people were arrested? Is that now classified a hate crime, upgraded charges? Okay.
Let me start with the first one, if you don't mind. The first one, we have a 15-year-old who stabbed several times on the northbound 4 train in the Upper Bronx in the 5-2 precinct. He was there with another male. They get off the train and they see another 5 or 6 males attack them immediately. This is a gang fight. That victim is a member of a gang. He's a 15-year-old, but he's been arrested a couple times. He's just coming from a probation meeting with a probation officer. So it looks like it was not random. This was purposely done. He was being followed. That's what we have right now. He's uncooperative. He won't help us. But through other witnesses and people with him, we were able to identify 3 others, and we're seeking them now. So he's a member of the G side, which is a local crew up there. The persons who attacked him are a member of MOB, M-O-B, and we have 3 identified. We're moving to arrest them today. That other incident you talked about, Dean, I'll have to get back to you, get you an update, because I don't have an update on it.
Okay. David?
Mayor, on the arrests of the officers earlier this week, the 2 men at the center of that corruption probe obviously had deep ties to the police department. They were also donors to your campaign. Were you aware of their connections through the police department and how close they were to the department when you came to know them? If so, were they introduced to you through those connections at the police department?
No. No and no is the answer. Not aware of the depth of their connection. No, they were not introduced to me through the police department. What they did was horrible. It's important to note that these actions, again, go back to 2012, 2013, even I think in some cases before. And as the U.S. Attorney said very clearly yesterday, that none of the actions taken by some individuals in the police department or by these two individuals who broke the law had anything to do with the mayor's office or with me.
How did you come to know that?
Just introduced by other supporters. I don't remember all the tick-tock of it, but that's how it happened. Yes?
Mr. Mayor, when was the last time you spoke with Philip Banks, and what did you two discuss?
Best of my memory, it was either the day he resigned or somewhere right around then. And I will be straightforward and say I expressed my disappointment in his decision and the way he handled it.
On that topic, were you aware of any allegations around Inspector Banks when you were making a decision about who to ask to become commissioner?
No, not at all. Okay, last call on policing topics. Okay? Or Pride Parade, obviously. If there's anything on we started out with Pride Parade. Then it became policing. There you go.
Commissioner Bratton has ever met the two businessmen involved in the federal probe?
Not to the best of my knowledge. Being quite frank with you, if they walked in front of me right now, I probably wouldn't recognize them either, despite their pictures in the paper. But to the best of my ability, fortunately, I don't think I've ever encountered them in any way, shape, or form.
Commissioner, can you spell out your methodological concerns? You mentioned some anecdotes, but can you tell us what methodologically you don't like about the Inspector General report?
Yes, he can.
Yes, one.
I think he's already said it, but he'll say it again.
It's narrow focus. The complexity of dealing with this, something the mayor and I think have been dealing with joined at the hip and shoulder throughout our time together. It's a complex issue. And we both agree, and during my time advising him in his run-up to his election, and then after my appointment on the issue of stop, question, and frisk as a very vivid example of that, in a very essential tool of policing, but overused. And as you know, clearly that my predecessor began to reduce it. I've reduced it even more significantly, and crime has continued to go down fairly significantly, even with that reduction. Similarly, the efforts by the City Council, the Mayor and I, after a year and a half of negotiation, which I fully support, that legislation, is intended to give my officers more discretion than they might have had back in the 90s when we were mandating that they make certain arrests rather than summonses because the situation was so bad. Now the situation is such that we feel we can do an admonition, a warning, a civil summons rather than a criminal. Goes to the other gentleman's question about, or the woman maybe, the question about the parade this weekend. The idea of how would we intend to enforce quality of life issues such as public urination, et cetera. The idea is that our officers to use the minimum amount of their enforcement powers to correct the condition. And if it's necessary to escalate, well then they're trained to escalate. So in terms of the report itself, I fail to understand the need for it at this particular time. And I question, has the IG been even reading the newspapers? Is he aware of all that this administration and this police department has been doing? Because they seem to be questioning a period of time before we came into office.
Let me just add to that very quickly. Again, absolutely respecting and being fair to DOI and to the police IG. In black and white, they say this is not a fuller analysis of the broken window strategy. But I share the concern. It's still a narrow look at the question of quality of life crime enforcement. I want to just put it into a very quick context. We are safer than we've ever been, first and foremost, and I'll give credit to the Commissioner and to Jack Maple, first and foremost because of CompStat. To me, as a layman, but a layman who's now been steeped in this for the last 2.5 years, the foundation for change was CompStat. But broken windows plays a crucial role in the equation. I think some misinterpretations going on the question of was the concern that broken windows policing specifically and always led to a reduction in other violent crimes? Well, the Commissioner just spoke to that. There are times when there's a direct correlation, a fair evasion where someone has a gun, an illegal gun on them. Well, that's a direct impact on reducing violent crime. There's other times where it's just quality of life enforcement because we have laws and the police enforce our laws. And if you look at what brought down violent crime, you have to look at the whole almost 25-year time frame, and you have to look at the role of CompStat, the role of broken windows, the number of police officers, a variety of forces. It's a variety of factors, I should say. So those are the things I think need to be put in perspective here. But I really want to emphasize the Commissioner is making very clear there are lots and lots of individual cases where quality of life enforcement specifically stopped violent crime. He's not claiming, I'm not claiming, that that is the totality of quality of life enforcement.
Just to quickly follow up,
yeah.
Are you concerned that you have one commissioner or inspector general who's commissioning a report that your police commissioner believes is fatally flawed and useless?
No. It's democracy. It's checks and balances. Look, DOI has a role to play. We have a police inspector general. Maybe, you know, everyone remembers the vibrant debate in 2013 over what types of safeguards we should have and reforms we should have. By the way, again, we pull back the camera a little and remember the discussion of 2013. We have a police IG. Does anyone expect the police IG and the police commissioner to always agree? I don't think that's the nature of it.
You don't hit a home run every time you come to bat. This time they fouled out.
There you go. So,
it's that simple.
But the other point is, if you look at the reduction of stop and frisk, look at the summons reform, look at the reduction of marijuana arrests, there's a really extraordinary pattern going on here. And I agree with the Commissioner. That all needs to be looked at in discussing where we're going. Last call on police-related or parade-related issues. Got two, David and Jillian, then we'll go to other topics. Go ahead.
Those reports are shown to the police department, the Commissioner, and to City Hall before they're released to the public. Did you request that the Commissioner, DOI, insert that graph that seemed to clang with everything else in the report about broken windows?
No, I didn't. I don't know if you
I'm sorry, David, I didn't hear the question.
I wondered if you requested that the DOI Commissioner insert a graph clarifying that the report didn't talk about broken windows in his executive summary.
No, that we will be responding with 90 days in a very comprehensive way. Might not be 80 pages, but it will be comprehensive. And I'd suggest if you want a more thorough report that you review the one that many of you reported on when we issued it several years ago. That's the world of quality of life enforcement from the police department perspective. I don't know if this was looked at by the IG during his review. But again, it's in all due respect to the IG, we work well with him, closely with him. He has issued a number of reports that we are obliged to comment on. His role is to have oversight over the department. We respect that. I've been working with IGs for years and inspector generals in the LAPD. And on this one, we respectfully disagree.
Yeah. And David, you know, what did Sigmund Freud say? Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. The IG is a very experienced, sophisticated guy, as is the DOI Commissioner. I believe they fundamentally wanted to tell the world that this was not a holistic look at broken windows. And in fact, they wanted to avoid that misunderstanding, and that's why they did what they did. Jillian, and then we'll go to other topics, starting with Andrew. Go ahead.
Sort of bringing it back to Pride.
Thank you, Jillian.
Well, wait.
Okay, wait, we're going to Andrew now.
Stonewall last week, Review and the police commissioner got some pretty hearty boos from the crowd at certain points. I was wondering sort of what you thought of that and, you know, just sort of bring it back to the relationship.
Yeah, Jillian, look, I really respect that people report on what they see, but I also always say put things into some context. First of all, I think the crowd at the vigil was concerned very early on that they wanted to hear the names of those who were lost read. And I think that was a very legitimate concern, and there were a lot of speeches from a lot of people, and I think we happened to be the lucky ones to go last. I think some people were frustrated. I don't take that personally. Second of all, there are people with different viewpoints at that vigil. I think some people who happen to disagree with some of our policies had come up to the front to make their views known. Again, that's called democracy. But when I look at the totality of the community and all the things we're doing with and for the community, I'm very confident that a real majority of people think we're on the right track and want to see this deep collaboration between the NYPD and the community grow. I mean, I want to just take a historical moment to say outside, it's symbolic, but it's very moving symbolism to me. An NYPD vehicle painted in the pride colors. In 1969, not that long ago, a lot of people in this room who were around in 1969, that would have been so inconceivable there are no words in English for it. We have traveled in the space of just a few decades to a point now where this NYPD not only has hundreds of LGBT officers, but regards itself as here to protect the LGBT community from any discrimination or hatred or hate crimes. That's a sea change. So I'm very satisfied we're on the right track, but anytime any of us show up in public, we're going to hear people disagree with us. That's hardly a newsflash to me. All right, Andrew.
Speaking of being on the right track, build it back. How convinced are you that you're still on the right track there, and how concerned are you about the house that collapsed in Garrison Beach yesterday? We know that DEC has suspended that contractor's rebuilding efforts. Are you concerned that you promised too much in guaranteeing that all the construction will be finished in 2016?
It is the right thing to do. I made that pledge believing it was necessary in every sense, including pushing the government to go farther faster. And I think you can see from some evidence in our administration, pre-K is a great example, the affordable housing plan is a great example. Sometimes the only way you move government is to put up a high bar and very clear one. I think we are on the right track. I think we got a lot of work to do on a tight time frame, but we are throwing in the kitchen sink to get it done. The collapse obviously concerns me. Thank God no one was hurt. From everything I know, it was an isolated incident, but we're going to look at it very carefully to make sure that nothing like that happens again. Yes?
The Staten Island Yankees are planning to rebrand over the next year, and they're asking fans to come up with names. So as a baseball fan, you went last year. I was with you. I was wondering if you had any suggestions or what you think they should name themselves.
I'm going to get to work on that. I'm going to offer my first suggestion because of the importance of the ferry as a symbol of Staten Island, maybe the captains. Okay. There's my first offering, but I'm going to probably put most of my time into this issue from this point on because I am that much of a baseball fan. Yes?
Mr. Mayor, this week during a debate among the Democratic candidates for the 13th congressional district, some of the candidates indicated they believe Commissioner Brett should resign or should consider resigning, or you should look at that issue because of some investigations or arrests. Where do you think that's coming from? What would you say to these candidates?
I would say they're out of their minds. This is the most effective police commissioner we've ever had, and he's been an agent of reform and progressive change, and he ain't going anywhere. Yes.
Certainly. So a judge struck down, or at least halted, your effort to give a water credit to, what is it, 664,000 homeowners. Are you concerned you can't even give money away right now?
I believe we're going to prevail in that case. We are appealing immediately. Let's be very clear. This was the landlord lobby trying to interfere with an effort to provide 660,000 New Yorkers with a credit on their water bill. 660,000 households were going to benefit because it was time to stop charging people on their water bill for things that weren't water. And it's a major reform I've been working on since I was public advocate. We finally got there, and we were trying to do something good for homeowners. And it was the RSA, the landlord lobby, that stepped in to try and stop it. If I were a homeowner, I am a homeowner, I should say, if I were any other homeowner, I would be pissed off at the RSA right now because they're standing in the way of fairness for homeowners. We believe we're on very strong legal ground, and we believe we're going to win that case in the near term and get right back to providing that credit for homeowners. Yes?
Your thoughts on the Supreme Court's immigration ruling?
Say again?
Supreme Court's immigration ruling?
It's horrible. I think the president was right all along. What the president's executive action aimed to do was to help as many as 5 million of our fellow residents of this country to protect their families and have a decent life. I have no idea how the Supreme Court's reasoning led them to their decision. I think it's a defeat for the American ideal of embracing all people. And it's going to have to be overcome. At the same time, I'll say I believe we will get to comprehensive immigration reform in the near term because I think the public will demand it, and that will help to resolve the issue. But it's a horrible defeat for millions of people in this country and for our values. Ozzy.
I think Governor Andrew Cuomo said that you were lucky to get a one-year extension of mayoral control of city schools and said that there wasn't the kind of support in the assembly that some outsiders would presume. I'm wondering if you...
I don't know how he's counting. We had a vote last year and a vote this year in the Assembly for a 3-year extension by an overwhelming margin. I think that's a fact. It's an obvious fact. So I don't know why he is denigrating the majority of the Assembly who voted that way.
Mr. Mayor, about a year ago, it was after the end of session, was when you obviously famously said what you said about the governor and vendettas and such. With things basically as bad as they've ever been between the two of you seemingly, was it a mistake to do that a year ago, A? And B, do you think he's using the levers of state government power to undermine New York City business at this point?
The first answer is no. I said the truth. I stand by it, and as I've said many times, when the governor does something to help New York City, I'll thank him and commend him. When he does something to hurt New York City, I'll call him out and I'll work against it. That was certainly the case. I praised him when he moved the minimum wage bill and the paid family leave bill. I opposed him when he tried to put huge cuts on CUNY and on Medicaid that would have harmed the city fundamentally, and I'll stick to that pattern. Look, I think the governor should think very carefully about the fact that this city represents 43% of the population of the state and is worthy of respect. He should respect this city. He should not try and undermine the efforts of this city. We are the economic engine of the state. We are the #1 contributor to the revenue of the state government. We would like to work cooperatively with the state. But the people of New York City demand respect. Yeah.
When you look at the path ahead now, do you have any plans to try to fix that relationship?
I'm always happy to, but again, what I said a year ago wasn't off the cuff. It was after a year and a half of experience where I saw so many initiatives undermined for unfair reasons that really hurt the people of New York City. A year and a half ago, we thought we were going to get something done on 421A that would have helped us to achieve affordable housing. We thought we had every right to a longer extension of mayoral control, just as my predecessor had gotten. A number of examples where the state government didn't serve us. He's the head of the state government. And so it was right to call that out, and I'll keep doing that. I'm always ready to improve any relationship. There's plenty of people who I have real disagreements with, but I still talk to. I talk to Leader Flanagan. I talk to folks in the Republican Party here in this city. Council members, for example. I'm always willing to sit down with people and try and find common ground. But my job as mayor is to stand up for people of New York City. And if our interests are affronted, I will call it out. Marsha.
Mayor, I wonder, going back to the corruption indictments that were on sale today, earlier in the week, if you had time to read them, and if your assessment of the kind of corruption that's been going on, as you point out, since 2012, is different given the fact that these were chiefs, these were bosses, as opposed to, rank and file police officers that might have been involved in like the Silverco era or, in terms of drug.
Yeah, look, first of all, I haven't read it, but I do certainly, your question is very pertinent. I think anyone who takes an oath of office, whether an individual police officer or a chief or an elected official, has an obligation to the people. A small group of people violated that oath. That's what we know so far, and obviously there could be others. Now, again, a very small number in a department of 36,000 people. A very small number even among the senior members of the NYPD leadership. They are bad apples, and they're going to pay the price. But I agree entirely with the notion the higher up you go the food chain, the more responsibility you take on, and the more you're supposed to be an example to others. So I don't know how someone gets to the kind of ranks we're talking about and does something so stupid and so venal. It's just not even close. And all of us are trained on gift limits, for example. Anyone who says, oh, I didn't know, I couldn't take a trip to Las Vegas, is lying. So it's very troubling. But I'm going to emphasize, and thank you for noting it too, these instances began before Commissioner Bratton and I were in office. And the U.S. Attorney said very affirmatively they had nothing to do with City Hall, they had nothing to do with me. Yes, in the back.
About your supervised release program,
Louder?
Supervised release program. There was a woman that was badly beaten in Brownsville on June 7th, and the man who beat her ended up getting released on that program. He was only charged with misdemeanor felony. She was hospitalized for 4 days. She's criticizing the program and says that she's concerned that there will be people that fall through the cracks and are released on this program.
I don't know of this case, and we'll certainly look at it and get back to you. Obviously, I'm very troubled if anyone's been a victim of violence. The broad concept, anything like that, supervised release, is for people who have not committed violent crimes. And that's the whole concept, to try and not have someone who is a low-level offender, nonviolent offender, end up going through the penal system and end up in Rikers Island, for example. That's a fair notion. That's a notion that's been proven to be effective many times over. God forbid there's ever an exception to that, so I want to know the facts of this case, and then we'll be able to comment on it.
Mayor, you said that you opposed the chokehold bill because it would prevent a police officer who's in a death struggle, I think you should use the term, from imposing it to protect himself or the life of another person. Can you point to anywhere in that city council bill that prevents a police officer from using the chokehold if it is that kind of life and death?
Look, I think it's quite clear. The chokehold is not acceptable under NYPD rules, and it hasn't been for decades. The question is obviously always enforcement. We're going to enforce that very, very vigorously. We have been. But the minute you legislate, there is a slippery slope, and this is about respecting. We've already made very clear our obligation to the public is to reduce the use of force. There should never be an inappropriate use of the chokehold, and any officer who engages in that will have very serious consequences. We're doing a lot more training to help officers not fall into that situation. But I also fundamentally believe that a law that may leave open the possibility, and that's how I see it with this law, that an officer could be prosecuted criminally for defending their own life appropriately, I'm not comfortable with that.
Slippery slope is codified in law, but not slippery slope based on NYPD regulations.
Because it's a criminal charge. It has a whole set of other ramifications and penalties. Okay, yes.
You said publicly that donor registration, Jewish donors involved in registration, right? You or City Hall folks have not done anything for these donors, or not given them any sort of special treatment. Are there any instances where you have intervened on a donor's behalf?
Again, like I said earlier about the folks who claim they don't know the ethics laws, I've been working in public life for, 20 years plus in different ways. I know that there are very clear and appropriate standards. You can, in any instance, for example, someone's raising a concern to a government agency, and you want to make sure they get a right to raise their concern, that's fine. You don't have a right to intervene inappropriately. I feel I've stuck to that standard 100%. Every one of us who does this work right, has received a lot of training, formal training, ethics training over the years, and I borrow from that all the time. But if there's ever an area where you need guidance, turn to your counsel, which I do all the time as well. I've done it in previous roles. That's how you're supposed to do it, yes.
You mentioned the ongoing deadness of 421A. Is it time to revise?
That's a good phrase, the ongoing deadness.
I was holding it in my head. Is it time to revise that 200,000 unit plan? And do you think anyone would fault for it if you did?
I don't want to conjecture who would fault or not fault. It's not time to revise it. We believe in the plan. It is absolutely on schedule. By the way, again, something worthy of examination is we didn't actually believe with our 200,000 unit plan that we could hit ideal numbers in the first year or two. I want to give immense credit to Alicia Glenn and Vicki Bean and Gary Rodney and everyone who's been involved. We're ahead of pace right now on a plan that normally you'd think you'd ramp up the first 2 years and your bigger numbers would be in later years. So we're on pace, even with the delay in action on 421A. We're going to continue to be on pace this year. I'm astounded that Albany didn't act. This is one of the #1 tools for creating affordable housing. And again, a very slippery slope was started by the governor last year in holding it back, and now, the cause that has led to inaction. And it's going to ultimately hurt this housing market a lot if it's not addressed soon. And it's going to lead to a lot less affordable housing. I can tell you something. When the people of this city start to recognize that Albany is holding them back from being able to afford to live in New York City, there will be a rebellion. And people in Albany will hear that loud and clear. There's still absolutely an opportunity to fix it. Because even though it was a rather unusual methodology to leave the negotiations in the hands of Rebbe and the building trades, that still can be done, and if completed, then it would be activated immediately. What is the good news? I'm an optimist by nature, or I wouldn't do this work, so I'll find some good news in this equation. There's one piece of objective good news. 421A, as we know it, is dead, meaning the 421A that subsidized luxury condos, the 420A that didn't create enough affordable housing, the 420A that's a bad deal for the taxpayer. That's dead and gone. That's never coming back. So at least we got rid of the negative. I'd sure as hell like to see the positive, and our leaders in Albany have to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, with the numbers, I mean, some of the first-year numbers were projects that were in the pipeline. Then there was a kind of glut of permits out because people were afraid 421A would expire. And I think that Glenn and Dean would agree that there's, concern about the drop after that if this continues.
Well, your question is well informed. Let me clarify what I'm saying. This year was the way I think it was phrased. We are convinced that this year we will stay on pace because so much has been started, and because, remember, preservation is most of the plan, 60% of the plan, and the preservation can keep going regardless of 421A. You're absolutely right if you say next year, the year after, will it start to affect our plan. It's not only going to affect our plan, it's going to affect a lot of other things. It's going to affect the housing market, it's going to affect employment, it's going to affect the availability of affordable housing for New Yorkers. If I was anybody in Albany right now, I would get to work quickly on fixing this issue and resolving 421A. Because again, if not, they will hear from their constituents, and their constituents will be very angry. That's my prediction. David, you get one more.
I just wanted to ask a meta conversation about this press conference.
You're so meta.
You've now been here for an hour and 20 minutes. You went past where your press secretary said, 2 more questions.
Damn that Eric Phillips, always trying to contain me from saying what I want to say. Yes.
It seems as if you're following the advice of your former press secretary in the Daily News today. I wonder if you read that and what you made of her advice. And if she gave it to you before, and now you're seeing it in the Daily News.
I have a lot of respect for her, and really appreciate all Karen did for us. Respect her, obviously, her right to give her view. We're going to do things the way we think makes sense. We do this kind of format. We do town hall meetings. We do the weekly call-in show. And I'm always going to endeavor to communicate better. And I'm going to be spending, I'm thrilled to say, a lot more time out in the communities of this city now, which I really look forward to. Thank you.